Hey guys, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go over a contingency table to show you how it can be used in a problem. So most contingency tables look at two categorical variables. But what's cool about this problem is that it actually has three categorical variables in one table. So here it's looking at the acceptance rates into graduate programs, and it's looking at acceptance rates for males and for females. And what you can see is that for a lot of the applicants, males tended to apply to programs 1 and 2, where most of the females applied to programs 3 and 4. And so we want to take a look at and see if that will affect our analysis if we were to look at overall acceptance rates by gender. So to start, what we want to do is we want to look at the overall acceptance rates for all of the applicants. And so to calculate that, what I'm going to start by doing is I'm going to put these numbers in an Excel table, and I've done that already here. So here we have the total number of males accepted into each program, the total numbers of applicants, and then again for females, the total number of acceptance and the total number of applicants that applied. And so when we get the total applicants accepted, we're just summing up the males and the females to get this last number. So you can see I just summed up those two cells here in Excel. And the same thing is true for the total number of applicants in program 1. So the total number of applicants for all of the programs is going to be the sum of the males and females that were accepted. So that's just adding those two numbers up, as well as the total number of applicants into all of the graduate programs is going to be adding 2,159 with 847. All right, so these numbers come directly from this table up here. And so when we want to look at the overall acceptance rate that were admitted into these programs, we want to add up the total number of accepted applicants, so that's both male and female, along with the total number of applicants. So this is the total number of applicants, this is the total number of people accepted, and so that's going to give us the percent of people accepted into the graduate school. All right. So when we times this by 100, it's going to give us the acceptance rate, which was 40.7%, and that is our correct answer, is answer 3. So we're going to compare this to the overall acceptance rates for male and for female participants to see how it's different. So we want to determine who has a higher percentage acceptance rate, men or women. And we're just going to look at it overall. So we're going to look at the total acceptance rate for males and then again for females. So we can calculate that simply for men. It's going to be 933 divided by the total number of men that applied times 100 to get us our percent, and that's going to be 43.2%. For females, it's going to be the total applicants that were accepted, which is 291, divided by 847 that actually applied. And that's for all of the females that applied to all of the programs, and that's 34.4%. So you can see if we look at it overall, men have a slightly higher acceptance rate than females. Okay, so now we want to take into consideration the fact that females apply to programs 3 and 4 much more than men who apply to programs 1 and 2 more. So we're going to look at each of the programs individually and compare the acceptance rates between genders there. So here, this question is just looking at the acceptance rates in program 1, and they want to know who had a higher acceptance rate, men or women. So we'll just look at that condition upon program 1 up here. So for men, it was 451 got accepted out of the 820, and that is 55%. And for females, there were 92 that got accepted and 108 that applied, And what we'll see is that in this program, women had a much higher acceptance rate. So we're going to want to do this again for program 2 to look at the acceptance rate for male and for females again. And now we're only conditioning on program 2, so we're just looking at program 2. So for that, there were 332 men that got accepted out of the 556 that applied. Dividing by 100 will give us our percent, and that is 59.7%. We can do this for females, and what we'll see is that, again, females have a higher acceptance rate in this program. So 16 got accepted, 24 applied, times 100 gives us a percent of 66.7%. And again, you can see that in this program, females actually have a higher percentage of acceptance. Right. For program 3, we're conditioning on the fact that we're just looking at program 3, so this third row here. So we just have the information for those participants that applied to program 3. For men, it was 130 got accepted out of the 406 that applied, times 100. That's 32%. And for females, it was 157 out of the 378 that applied, and that's 41.5%. All right, so again, even in program 3, you can see that females had a higher acceptance rate. Lastly, we're going to do this for program 4, and we're going to see that it's really hard to get into program 4. So there were 377 men that applied, only 20 got in. So when we calculate that rate of acceptance, we'll see that it's only 5.3%. For females, 26 got in, but 337 applied, and their acceptance rate was 7.7. So you can see that, again, females had a slightly higher acceptance rate, but this is a really hard program to get in. So our overall results look like this. When we look at the totals, it looks like men have a higher acceptance rate. But when we compare each program individually, the females actually have a higher acceptance rate. So the question is, which statistics should we focus on? Should we focus on the overall rate, or should we focus on each program individually? The benefit of looking at each program individually is that it takes into consideration the fact that women tend to apply to these harder programs. So females apply to programs 3 and 4, and you can see that these are actually really difficult programs to get into. The men, on the other hand, they apply to the easier programs here. So most men apply to programs 1 and 2, which you can see have a much higher acceptance rate. And so the benefit of looking at the individual programs is that it takes into consideration that men tend to apply to the programs that are easier to get into, where the programs 3 and 4, the females tend to apply to. If we just look at the overall rate, acceptance rates, it doesn't take these into consideration. In fact, it averages this out. So this is why we see an odd result. So which comparison is most valid? Should we look at the overall rate or the individual rate? Well, as I suggested before, we want to look at the individual program comparisons because they take into consideration the fact that different number of applicants apply to each of the programs. And so it takes into consideration the fact that females are applying to much harder programs, which is going to decrease their acceptance rate. So that's it for categorical variables. Next time, what we're going to focus on is describing and displaying quantitative variables.